Geology, geology, geology. Welcome everybody to another show of Mini Geology. This is Daniel Minizini, your inquisitive geologist, here to connect geology with society. And today we will connect geology with history. So when researchers from university and industry came together in the first congresses of the beginning of last century, they met because they knew that the hidden knowledge of the work contained the great secrets of progress. So today we'll see how these first congresses were thought, how they were programmed, and how they were and where they were held through the history of the International Petroleum Congress, whose first event occurred in 1900 in Paris, France. We will talk about this with Francesco Gerali. Francesco Gerali is a Pew Scholar, IEEE History Center, co-editor also of the Oil Industry History Journal. Here with us, Francesco, welcome to the Mini Geology Show.
Hello, Daniel. Hello. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here with you today to speak about some petroleum industry history.
So, Francesco, which professional figures attended the conference?
Geologist from academia, chemist from the professional setting and academia, and engineers.
Who was invited? Was it a conference open to everybody, or you need an invitation to stay in the company, either to talk or just to attend?
Okay, the first International Petroleum Congress 1900 offered little less than 20 lectures, and they were invited with a direct invitation, probably 50 persons, but the Congress was open to everyone.
Did you have to pay to attend the Congress?
No, there was not a conference fee.
Tell us again, where was it physically held?
It was held in the pavilion of the Worthington Company. Was a company specialized in the production of heavy implants, valves, steam pumps, engines. It was a company that had a core business in the mining industry, as well providing machineries for the petroleum industry at the time.
How many people attended?
The first official numbers tells about, invited and presenters, just less than 80 persons, more or less.
Which nationalities?
French, British, Austro-Hungarian, and if I remember well, one Italian and a few Americans.
What was the language used?
Was used French and English.
What were the main topics of these lectures that today we would call talks? And do you remember how long were they? Were they similar to what we do today?
Okay, so there are not, unfortunately, so many technical information, because the first Congress was, yes, a success, but was a lucky experiment. The topic were several, from geology, from economic geography, technology. I remember was also presented by Fauch, the Austrian engineer, the so famous Fauch system. He presented something about his recent patents. But to speak about a, let's say, modern congress as we mean today, we have to go in 1905 in the second International Petroleum Congress that was held another time for the international, the Exposition Universelle, the international, the Expo, in 1905, in the summer of 1905, in Liège, in Belgium.
Why this International Petroleum Congress in 1900 and why in Paris? What's going on during that time in that place?
We have to make a little step behind. We have to fly to London, United Kingdom, in 1899. And everything started with a Russian, Lithuanian-born chemist, Paul Vorkovitz, who was working there for a petroleum company. Was a chemist, but mainly also was specialized in logistics and transportation. In 1899, he was a mid-career oil professional and found, together with some gentlemen from the oil industry in Great Britain, he put together a team of people to start to edit and print the Petroleum Industrial and Technical Review. That is the first technical journal. It was printed weekly. The first issue, the date was February 1899. This first issue, the opening, the first page, Paul Vorkovitz clarifies and wrote a small paragraph to start the journal. The title was Ourselves. Who we are, why we are now editing and printing for the first time in history a journal, a technical journal focused entirely on petroleum industry. In few words, Vorkovitz resumes the idea that now, at the time, 1899, petroleum industry is a global subject. And he said in this introduction, we realized that there is a lack of communication. There are some compartments in which are the several professionals, but there is not a unique voice. There is not a place, a virtual place, because we are still speaking about a journal. So in 1899, Paul Vorkovitz made to issue the first international journal focused entirely on geology, engineering, logistics, refining, etc., of modern petroleum industry.
So this happened in 1899 in London.
In London, exactly.
Paul Vorkovitz is, as you said, is a petroleum chemist.
Exactly.
And he works in a private company in London.
Exactly.
And he writes this compendium on the status of the art of the petroleum experts. So how do we move from 1899 to the following year, 1900, when we have this very first International Petroleum Congress?
Sure. Well, the journal gained immediately a huge success. It was published weekly. So it was a weekly monitor gathering via telegraph news from all over the world. So it was, this journal, the first place where a gentleman in London, a gentleman in Manchester, a gentleman subscribers in Paris could read for the first time in the same pages, in the same little journal, everything concerning oil shipments from Russia, oil production data about oil production in United States. Was the possibility to read news about shipments from the Dutch East Indies to Rotterdam, prices, and also the journal was capable to advance very quickly because it was featured by a lot of specialized advertisements. I mean, the producers of steam pumps, the producer of valves, the producer of derricks, producers of drilling tools were very, very interested about this journal because this journal was the window to the industry professionals, to the petroleum experts, was an important window. So he also gained a lot of sponsorship.
Yeah,
the
by the way,
idea was 1900 Paris International Exhibition. So 1900, it happens, was Paris. First, Paris, the capital of Europe. Second, 1900, the new century. So the gentleman of the Worthington Pumps company, the core company producing pumping systems, pipelining and whatever for the industry, offered in their pavilion, in their exhibition space, hospitality to Paul Vorkovitz and all the petroleum gentlemen interested to introduce themselves. Vorkovitz, smart person, also said, well, let's organize an international petroleum congress. Just make a step forward. Just don't have a place for the coffee or for the tea in between gentlemen. Let's organize something of formal and let's brand it the first, because for sure we are going to have the second. So it was a turning point. Now, for the first time, we are not making a showcase of petroleum, of tools for petroleum industry into a general boiling pots of everything. We have a space dedicated for petroleum gentlemen. We are going to talk of petroleum. We are going to speak about technology, possibilities, what we are doing, what will be our future goals. And it was a success. Really, we're invited a selected number of gentlemen, very important in the industry, from the academia, from the industry setting, and was coined, officialized the term petroleum expert. Because the idea of the Congress was borrowed from the idea of the journal. We want to include, everyone is welcome. We want to include people dealing, working, making business, selling, buying, developing technology for petroleum.
You mentioned how important was the role of Paul Vorkovitz, this chemist working for the private sector in London. Why he was so engaged who was he representing? It was just an employee of a private company in London, or he represents some geological society, because at that point you already have the London Geological Society, right?
So, good question. Why he did that? Passion, 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 and passion. I mean, I remember that when I was a student.
How do you know that, being you a historian? Is that like a gut feeling, or you see some documents that let you understand and infer that it was just passion and not economical interests or thirst of power?
Okay, first, about this guy, the founder of the journal and the founder of the International Congress, there is very little information before 1899, because basically it was a kind of Mr. No One. I mean, it was an oil, petroleum professional. I could detect several personal informations because the obituary, because several notes written posthumously, because he died, if I remember well, in 1921. So, and died aged 73. So, when he arrived to work in Great Britain, and then started this adventure of the journal and the Congress, was already a mature professional. I mean, he was a guy close to his 50s. He had a past. I could build some infos about his early life, about born in Lithuania, but Russian citizen, migrated in the United Kingdom. But the real reason why he migrated in the United Kingdom, I have no idea. He was not a man of, I mean, he was not having a public life. He wasn't having, before the journal and the Congress, some public charges or special appointments. It was like of the, you know, the song of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the fanfare for the common man. Was and is an interesting, one of the many interesting men that made a lot for the petroleum industry, and no one ever dug into them. I mean, there are plenty of petroleum experts that deserve a lot of credits, but it's very difficult to find the infos because they were not famous. I mean, after 1899, yes, you can find a lot of information about what Vorkovitz did, but early, no. We also need to highlight something. Allow me to use a strange expression, that at the time was not still shaped a petroleum intelligentsia, a core group, a cadre of people working and developing oil science and technology to cool. We are in years where the term petroleum geologist was not used. A petroleum engineer was not used. The institution of petroleum technologist in 1913 will arrive thanks to Boverton Redwood and Vorkovitz. But first, there was not a association, society, committee, or reference. Even in the Geological Society of London, obviously, there were scientists, gentlemen working in petroleum, but we have to wait before to find a cadre, core group, and people of reference. And this is, in this resides the importance of the journal Petroleum Industrial and Technical Review and the International Petroleum Congress, because that was the spark. So Vorkovitz found the interest of some gentlemen. Most probably it was not expensive or was not so difficult to start to print a new journal, but he had the means, he had the people, he had the news. And how to go in Paris? Well, he found the hospitality of pump, valves, pipes, huge producer exporting all over the world. So the adventure started.
So we have the Congress in 1900 in Paris, the first International Petroleum Congress. The Congress is held in Paris because of the World's Fair, or the Exposition Universelle, what we call the Expo today. By the way, 10 years before, the Eiffel Tower was built in the previous Exposition Universelle in Paris. And today we continue with that kind of legacy of building important things in the Expo. So in this Expo, which represents the first year of a new century, there are displayed many technological innovations, including, I read that there were the diesel engines, talking movies, talking films, the escalators, and also the telegraph phone, which was the first magnetic audio recorder. So within this context, we have the first International Petroleum Congress. Why sharing the knowledge in this Petroleum Congress when during those years you have a strong nationalism? You have wars before, wars that they are soon to come, and there is tension also economically. The private companies, they are competing, brutal competition. Was it common to share knowledge, or was during those years in the petroleum industry, or this was like something really innovative and revolutionary, and maybe not accepted by everybody?
We have to contextualize 1900. A lot of gentlemen, professionals from academia and companies, not necessarily people from competitor companies. People from academia were always happy to show their work, to share their work. There was a spirit of free communication. There was a spirit of everyone is welcome because we are on the same boat. Also, yes, a lot of nationalism, but it's needed to highlight something very important. At that time, there was no known part of the world a national petroleum company. The beginning of the age of the national petroleum companies, we have to wait the end of the First World War, when oil shift, the meaning of oil shifted from mineral, energy, weapon. In 1900, was still not invented the tank. In 1900, no machine gun was mounted on a jeep. in 1900, probably just the brother Wright were dreaming or put something flying in the air, but I don't know if they were thinking to install a 20mm cannon on their first plane. For sure, there were huge monetary interest. But in 1900, there was still a plenty of oil to find. There was a new ground for new people. So let me say, probably I'm going to get a shotgun from other historians, but I don't mind. This is still the romantic age of petroleum. Dirty, a lot of money, a lot of interest, but we can't survive without money, and we need an interest in life. So
in which sense you say romantic?
Romantic because the petroleum expert, first, before to be a petroleum expert, was a petroleum gentleman.
What do you mean by gentleman? You mentioned several times gentleman, especially
Yes,
when...
petroleum gentleman, to me, is the guy that put a lot of passion in what he does, knows that he is doing something of important, of relevant, captivating, challenging. You know, also working in petroleum was a good business. Could be the end of a career, the end of a life, the end of everything if the business was wrong, because you know it was very difficult to make mistakes in very easy, sorry, to make mistakes in petroleum and lose everything. But it was also an important business that, when done in the right way, was providing wealth, a lot of money. So the worker into petroleum, in the petroleum environment, in the upper floors, also someone who were respected, a new practitioner, a new professional, or a new scholar in a field that is improving, maturing, and people specialized. We're talking about chemists, engineers, geologists. So in that sense, gentlemen.
Isn't it maybe also gentleman in the sense that these people, they were aristocratic, or not necessarily?
No, so far I know, aristocratic people had a marginal role in the petroleum industry. Aristocratic people were more in the background, taking care of the business from the house and purchasing, reselling the oil concessions.
Let me ask you something related to gentlemen, because we are in 1900, and in Paris, also contemporaneously with the first International Petroleum Congress, we have also the second Olympic Games. And it happened contemporaneously in 1900, the Expo and the Olympic Games. Like it happened in 1992 in Spain. Very strange coincidence, but the very first Olympic Games outside of Greece, and the second time of modern Olympic Games. But it was the first time that women, they were welcome in the Olympic Games. What about women in the petroleum industry during those years?
I never found the info about that. All the documents, journals that I could read never mentioned me the participation of ladies into these events.
Let's move to this second Congress And it happens 5 years after the first International Petroleum Congress. In the first International Petroleum Congress, I read that the main topics of the program, they are origin of petroleum, the geology of petroleum, drilling, chemical treatments, transport and distribution, and the applications of the petroleum products.
Exactly.
We move to the second Congress, and in here in Belgium, there are 4 main thematic sessions. And one of those is geology exploration and exploitation, which today would be called upstream. Chemistry and industrial treatment, which today we would call chemicals. Utilization of petroleum and its derivatives, and that should be downstream. And legislation, which today we call policies.
Important legislation. You mentioned an important aspect.
So let's talk about this evolution from the first to the second Congress.
Sure. So the evolution, first, the space. They had their, they purchased, they had the availability to purchase their own space in their pavilion. Also now, for the second International Congress, was organized a real committee. And now we have members from almost every country of that time in Europe, and an historic member from the United States. It is the geologist David Talbot Day. So now what we find? First, in organizing, there was a committee, that decided a program. This time was not a guideline. Now was a real program. There were panels, papers were well divided, speakers were confirmed, no in absentia allowed, or you are here or nothing. Not only big names. No, now there was an audience of more than the group of petroleum gentlemen. Now we can really find a wild bunch of petroleum professionals. Now is well represented Romania, is well represented Azerbaijan, is well represented Russia, United States. We have also the first famous appearance of the Italian petroleum industry, thanks to the Florence geologist Celso Capacci. The business got strong. And this is proved by the very first element of competition, friendly, but competition. Because there was a lot of pressure. The Romanian members to organize in Bucharest, Romania, the third Congress. So it got so much importance that now was not people, yes, we are invited, we can go, I don't know. Oh, there's a Congress, what are you doing next week? We can go, well, I will let you know. No, different. Now there was people, they say, we have to be there. We have to make business at the International Petroleum Congress. We had a kind of Romanian connection in between 1905 and 1907 because they really did everything possible to organize a huge work. They asked the support to the King of Romania, the Secretary of Industry, all petroleum companies in Romania were called to contribute. I remember that for the first time, the organizing committee of the 1907 Bucharest event composed by almost 130 people. I mean, the first Congress was a bunch of gentlemen, romantic minds, passionate of oil. In Liège, there was a committee of about, an international committee of about 20 heads. But now the Romanian organized something very important. And we have also to highlight another important element. The real second most important technical journal for petroleum industry was born in Romania. It's the Petroleum Monitor, the Monitor of Petroleum. It's a wonderful journal. Shame on me, I can't speak or read very well Romanian because it's a resource an impressive resource for historians.
Now, you mentioned the three main international petroleum congresses.
Yes.
In the second one, where things that were more formally organized,
yes,
together with what we call today upstream, downstream, and chemicals, there was this fourth main topic of policies, or call at that time legislation. Why was it important to put this legislation into the main thematic sessions? Because today we have a similar situation. We need to build a stronger tie between researchers and policymakers. One of the most important relationships for the future of geology, because geologists, they have to better understand today the socioeconomic context where they operate, where they propose mitigations for problems that we have, like, for instance, climate change. What was the view of those people in 1905 when they met in Belgium regarding legislation?
Well, it was a oil and gas legislation. Okay, oil and gas legislation was a topic in development. Was a topic in development. Why? Well, first, I remember the example of Mexico, when in the beginning it was, you could ask to the state, I would like a concession, and people asking concession for mining were used to pay a lot for the concession, because to mine something you need a huge, vast amount of land. In the past, if you were lucky enough to drill the well in the right place, you needed just a handful of acres. So it was not convenient for the state, because or the person that was allowing the utilization of the land. So there was a kind of evolution. I mean, it's a very intricate and difficult subject. I mean, it's oil and gas legislation is a discipline. You remember that in 2018, I had a work experience at the College of Law at the University of Oklahoma, and I was dealing with oil and gas lawyers, and a fascinating experience because I learned a lot. But at the time, in 1900, 1905, 1907, there was still everything to discover, because in some more advanced places where an advanced petroleum industry like the United States, it was clear that the same legislation that you use for mining can't be applied for petroleum or gas. You need to find a different, you need to adapt to the new setting, the legislation. But given that petroleum was a booming, I mean, I repeat, these are the years of the rising of the Leviathan. We have to forget the 19th century idea of United States, Pennsylvania, New York, producing oil, the 80% of the oil exported in the world. No, now there are many new players, many new petroleum countries. The Galicia was well developed. The Polish Galicia was an important hub for petroleum. Azerbaijan, Russia was a huge hub. Even the Alsacia and Lorena between French and Germany, a very important hub. So every state has a mining legislation. Every state has a county, regional legislation. But now petroleum is an international business. So a gentleman from a banker, let me visualize, let me wonder. A banker from Copenhagen wanted to be capable to travel to Baku and talk with someone in oil, make business, and have copy of contracts, have legislation, something to refer to. The same parameters for oil leases, the same parameter about taxes. Who pays that fees if we have to pass through a country asking a fees? Who have to pay that right to the owner of the right? I mean, it was an intricate system and also a lucrative business. I mean, we have to remember now, we know, probably now we are not going to send our son or nephew to study law because there are a lot of lawyers now. Making law is not a more lucrative profession sometimes, better a dentist. But at the time, a lawyer was a kind of aristocrat. So being a lawyer into an expert into a new field of the law was also something of important. I mean, all the history. Sorry, then all the history of the petroleum industry is made by trailblazers that did smell the flavor of money behind the stink of petroleum. And these trailblazers with important ideas. And sometimes, you know, it's true. Sometimes the very commonplace. You say, the first who settle takes the better. It's true. It's true, especially in petroleum industry. So it was felt the necessity to have clear papers written black on white to talk the same language about oil, gas, and law.
So, Francesco, we have very few minutes to go.
Yeah.
Allow me to ask you also in here, like brief questions with brief answers. What do you think? I'm going to ask you about the achievements of each of these three conferences.
Yes.
So, looking back at these three international petroleum congresses held in 1900, 1905, and 1907, from the historical point of view, you are a historian, what do you think was the main achievement of the first Congress?
Allow me to make a sum of the first, of the second, and the third Congress. Allow me to do that, Daniel, because they are three different entities, but they complete them together. We have to consider the outcomes of all three of them. I think that that will give a better perspective, in historical point of view. Nomenclature. Unification of the nomenclature. Because for the first time, petroleum was discussed to the world. It was not more just a business of businessmen. They speak the language of the money. So I buy oil in Baku, that must be delivered by vessel somewhere else in Europe. I bought this money, I want to make this money. Now we are speaking about the petroleum industry of the technologist, of the geologist, the engineer, and the chemist. And there was a kind of Babylon Tower of languages. Russians from the Russian Empire and Baku, Azerbaijan were using some specific grades. Europe, different unit of measurement for grades and temperature. Was not already well diffused the idea of metric system. Also in a very technical, specific details for the language between the chemists. So the very first most important outcome to me was not that finally some gentlemen, men of wealth and taste in petroleum decided to join together and have this this wonderful venue discussion. The relevance is technological, is scientific. I mean, that started the idea of the bureau of standards for petroleum. We have to remember now that now we are used, we have the APG, deciding, etc., 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 about geology. We have the API, American Petroleum Institute, and we use the standards of the American Petroleum Industry. How many other standards, how many other things I can mention? The IEEE, the same IEEE, defining the global standards for science and technology. There was not all that. 1900, 1905, 1907, they were called, they first understood, and then they were called to create a lingua franca for the environment of science, technology, engineering in petroleum industry. So yes, my answer is definitely the biggest outcome, nomenclature.
We talk about 3 international petroleum congresses. What does it happen after the third? And how do you connect that with today? What is the legacy of those congresses?
Unfortunately, the fourth never happened. Unfortunately, the fourth never happened because in 1907, it was decided to organize in 1909 the fourth Congress in Lvov, a city in the Galicia, Austria, Galicia, Poland. Today is in Ukraine. It's called the Lviv. But for some reasons, it was not organized. Then it was tried to postpone to 1911, but nothing happened. Again, troubles. And then here comes David Talbot Day that said, okay, it's time we can try to move the International Petroleum Congress to the United States. But that never happened. So there was a moment of hiatus where all the people of this organizing committee, of this International Petroleum Congress committee, started to travel to several other newborn petroleum conferences, focused on chemistry, conferences focused on logistic, many topics, not more a huge international of everything, but specialized conference. We have to wait 1933. In 1933, finally, and in the United Kingdom, was founded on the spirit, the same identical spirit of the first International Petroleum Congress, founded the World Congress, 1933, London. And it seems that many of the early gentlemen, friends of Vorkovitz and still surviving, Vorkovitz died, was not there. But it seems that the same people that was involved in the first wave of the International Petroleum Congress were capable to revitalize the idea of we need a cyclical, periodical, consistent World Oil Congress.
And so they changed also the name. It's called, before it was called International Petroleum Congress and then World Petroleum Congress.
Yes, exactly. And
is this...
it is an institution that since then organizes all over the world every 4 years a Congress. Again, is a wonderful, a gold mine of information for historians, because every volumes of proceedings of this World Petroleum Congress reveals to historians a lot of important information about the history of the petroleum industry.
So we still have today the World Petroleum Congress.
Yes. Unfortunately, in this, now I don't remember well the dates. Probably was the last one, 2017.
It was in Turkey.
In Turkey, yeah.
All right, so Francesco, we're at the top of the hour. Is there anything else you want to add to this aspect, historical aspect of the petroleum industry that can maybe connect with today, what's happening today?
Well, for example, Vorkovitz, father of the first journal, and after the idea of the journal, all over the world started to flourish, to develop many other journals. For example, in the US in 1910, the Oil and Gas Journal, that is still alive today, and they are doing a wonderful job. But mainly, yes, the idea of the Congress still very important, relevant. You know how much are important international conference for the development of the discipline, of the scholarship, and we all look forward, Daniel, after the pandemic, to have a meeting between petroleum gentlemen and keep on doing our work in person, high to high.
Ladies and gentlemen, today.
Ladies and gentlemen, correct. Another important step, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, Francesco Gerali was in conversation with us today at Mini Geology. Francesco Gerali is a Pugh Scholar in the IEEE History Center, and he is also co-editor of the Oil Industry History Journal. Thank you so much, Francesco, to have been with us in Mini Geology. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks. See you soon. Thanks, Daniel.